Hello, my name is Marek and I will talk about what's new in Qubes OS 4.1. What exactly is Qubes 4.1? It's a result of over 4 years of work, and the main new experimental feature is GUI domain, GUI cube, but also we have several other changes like new QRXExec policy formats, several UI improvements, better HVM integration, and also a lot of software version were updated. In this talk, I will include some some description or some details of selected the most important features, but a lot of them there are too many of them to fit in this talk, so you can take a look at draft release notes for more details. There are some comments, and there are also the actual content is also partially prepared there already. Okay, so first of all, what's about this GUI cube? In Qubes 4.0 or older, the desktop environment is running in DOM0. And also DOM0 is the place that is responsible for managing all the domains, or that is responsible for configuration, for storage, for all the system functions. In Qubes 4.1 we are introducing experimental feature support for GUI cube, which is for running separate VM for desktop environment. This means, first of all, you can finally meaningfully isolate and maybe even limit what the desktop environment can do. But also it allows in the future several new use cases. For example, multi-user support, maybe virtual desktop infrastructure based on cubes, but also having disposable GUI cube, it's possible to have kind of guest mode. Okay, so how does it work? We have 3 modes currently for GUI cube. First, the classic one, well, the primary one with GPU connected to the GUI cube directly as a PCI device. This way it looks and behaves more or less like it is in the DOM0 case, with of course with the limitation that it's, well, not really DOM0, so all the actions you execute in such GUI cube are using admin API to be executed in appropriate place, in most cases in DOM0, but with GUI cube you can actually control what is executed where and what actions are allowed. Another case, another possibility is using some networks protocol to access your desktop environment. As a proof of concept, we've prepared configuration with VNC server, but it's possible to use any network remote desktop protocol. And finally, there is a hybrid GUI cube for the case where GPU pass-through does not work reliably on a particular hardware. In this case, a GPU is connected to DOM0 and is using Qubes GUI protocol to display a desktop environment from a GUI cube. So let's take a look at the network case. This is a view you get after you log into the GUI cube using VNC. Looks pretty similar to normal cubes. So how does it work? You can interact with the menu, and as you can see, there are a few less VMs. Also, the widget is working. We can list VMs, more or less because like normal cubes, but some VMs are missing. Sysnet, sysfirewall is not here. This is because QRXExec policy for admin API is configured to hide them. But otherwise, you can start VMs, you can interact with them. You can, depending on the QRXExec policy, you can even create new VMs and have them accessible here. So we can go to Qubes website. In the personal cube, we can create and start new disposable VM, for example. So this more or less behaves like a normal cube system, but with the because it's running in a separate VM, it's possible to specify, to limit what this cube is allowed to do. Okay. So what next? There are several QRXExec improvements. Because GUI cube requires is using admin API to execute a lot of actions, and this puts a lot of more performance and configuration requirements on QRXExec. So first new feature of QRXExec is about socket services. In the past, QRXExec service is a separate application, a program script binary that needs to be started for every single call. This means, in case of, for example, Python scripts, the startup time is quite long. So in Qubes 4.1 we introduced another mode of starting and connecting to QRXExec services. It's using Unix sockets. So instead of script, you set up a symlink to a Unix socket or Unix socket directly in Qubes RPC directory. When QRXExec tries to connect to such service, it opens a connection to Unix socket, and then at the beginning send all the connection metadata that normally were sent to the service using program arguments. So now it's they are sent over this socket connection, and after that, there is normal data from the normal data channel to the service. This allows a much quicker startup, much quicker connection to a service, which is especially important for admin API, which is using a lot of short connections. But it also allows using a single process to handle multiple calls at the same time. And the other case, case is useful for window icons. This is a Python daemon that is importing a lot of graphics libraries for converting those icons and drawing them, etc. and it's using about 20 megabytes of memory. In Qubes 4.0 it was separate process for each VM, which was using quite a lot of memory in DOM0. In Qubes 4.1 we have one daemon that is handling all the icons for all the VMs, and it's using much less memory this way. There are also other the more details about this is in the dedicated article linked below. Okay, what next? There is new QRXExec policy format. The QRXExec policy now is combined from multiple files. So instead of separate policy in for each service, we have a common policy for all the services, and this policy includes also information which services and which arguments it should be applied to. This allows easier auditing the policy and specifying global rules, like nothing can call into vault some valuable cube of vault or something like that. But it also allows to better split the policy into logical files, like here default rules, here user rules, and here rules for some specific application that consists of for example 5 QRXExec services. So it simplifies the maintaining the rules maintenance. There are also some minor improvements to the rules, like ability to show notification when the call is allowed or denied. And there is also ability to allow a call, but only to a already running cube. So how the new format looks like? Very similar to the old one, but at the beginning we have 2 extra columns. First is for the service name, and the second one is for the call argument. And as you can see in the third column, both columns can have some wildcard value to apply them for to all the calls or multiple calls. And another improvement is policy daemon that is responsible for caching the policy, which also means a lot faster connection time. Yet another improvement for admin API. Okay, so what about UI improvements? First of all, Qubes Manager got a lot of new features, like selecting multiple cubes and applying an action for all of them, like changing a template or changing a net VM, things like that. There also the internal structure, the code structure was also significantly improved, and also the cube setting dialog got some new features, like setting for GUI daemon. Currently there are just a few checkboxes, like allowing UTF-8 characters in the window titles, but we will add more in the future. And finally, there are also some improvements to create new cube dialog, for example, setting initial memory or better descriptions. As you could notice on the GUI cube demo, there are new beautiful icons, separate different icons for different cube types. There's also an icon for DOM0 with a crown. And related to that, we try to use term cube more consistently in the system. it's not fully transformed yet, but we are migrating to this terminology. Another feature that was frequently requested is a mouse cursor shape. Please take a look at the mouse cursor here, how it changes now when you move it around. Previously, VM had no control over the mouse cursor shape, and now it's possible to use this visual indicator too. And finally, we have better disk space monitoring when not only DOM0 is running out of space, but also a individual VMs is running out of space. We get a notification, and it's also possible to see a list of VMs that are running out of space, and either ignore it or open settings to make some increase the VM private volume size, so it's easier to spot when you are running out of disk space. Okay, next topic in 4.1 is better HVM integration, specifically for audio support for Linux Qubes. We have just Pulse Audio plugin, Pulse Audio module that is connecting to DOM0, or in Qubes 4.1 it's possible also to have audio handled in dedicated Qubes audio. So it's a Pulse Audio module. This means it requires running Pulse Audio, which is a Linux daemon. So we didn't have audio on Windows, for example. In 4.1 there is support for emulated audio card for HVMs. So this is a kind of combined solution where Pulse Audio with appropriate module is running in a stub domain, and this stub domain is connecting to QEMU, which emulates audio cards to the HVM, and this HVM see the audio card as just a normal device, so it's possible to use that from basically any operating system. There is similar thing for USB devices. So in 4.0 and generally for VMs with native Qubes support, we use USB IP driver and connect to it using QRXExec. This is again Linux only solution. Well, theoretically there is USB IP implementation for Windows, and we also have a QRXExec agent for Windows, but this is not easy to integrate, and also not the USB IP for Windows, it's not really maintained. So we are using a similar hybrid solution, combined solution, where USB IP is terminated in stub domain and then connected to QEMU, which emulates USB controller to the HVM. This works for simple devices. It may not be performant enough for things like USB camera or other high throughput or low latency latency but it is some initial version that could be optimized later. And finally, Qubes 4.1 brings a lot of updated software. Specifically, there is new Zen version, so instead of Zen 4.8 in Qubes 4.0, we have Zen 4.14 in Qubes 4.1. There are a lot of changes in Zen. Well, too many to fit them in this presentation, but there are some highlights include a better UEFI support. Specifically, it's again possible to start to have a group bootloader in UEFI. This allows easy way to choose which kernel to boot, choose which Zen to boot. If something goes wrong, for example, it's much easier to recover. But also there is the opposite feature where all the boot files, including Zen, DOM0 kernel, kernel parameters, intramfs, etc., can be combined in a single unified Zen IFI file. And this file can be signed with user-configured secure boot keys. So this allows to use secure boot in a kind of meaningful way. It's still not a full UEFI secure boot support, but it's a step in that direction. And finally, this in this new Zen version brings core scheduling, so it's possible to use hyper-threading in kind of safe way, where all the threads of a given core are always assigned to the same VM. So if someone finds yet another speculative execution bug that allows to leak information between threads on the same core, with core scheduling, that would only leak data from the same VM. So it won't allow leaking data from other VMs. In Qubes 4.0 we disable hyperthreading for this very reason. In Qubes 4.1 hyperthreading is still disabled by default, but then support core scheduling, so it's possible to enable core scheduling and enable hyperthreading again. So if someone need some more CPU power, it's also an option. Then we have newer DOM0. DOM0 is based on Fedora 32, but with introduction of GUI Cube, the desktop environment is no longer strictly bound to the DOM0 version. So it's possible to start to use GUI Cube based on other template like newer Fedora or Debian or something else, and then have that as the desktop environment. So in case of GUI Cube, the DOM0 interface, the DOM0 distribution is very much hidden from the user. In the future, we plan to use some stripped down minimal Linux in DOM0, but for that we need to stabilize the GUI Cube to have it the default and the only option, which is not yet the case in Qubes 4.1. And finally, there are new templates. So there is Fedora 34 in testing already. There is the Debian 11 in testing. This is not strictly related to Qubes 4.1 because those templates are available for Qubes 4.0 too. But I included them here because this is also something done while working on Qubes 4.1. Okay, so this is a short introduction of what's new in Qubes 4.1. Thank you.